I am ready.
All right, streaming and recording. I'm gonna start playing the intro. You guys ready?
Should we clap?
Yep.
Oh.
3 and 2 and 1 and. Hey everybody, welcome to Analog Stick Radio, brought to you by Bit Cultures. I am your host, Mitch, and as always, I will be joined by my two favorite people in the entire world. Over to my left, I have Christopher, the Christopher.
I am me.
And then I have down to the bottom with this, still having his Christmas tree up, even though it's like July 12th.
How is
I
that
got
still
Dakota.
green? That's really
what's up?
impressive.
I got
guys.
the holiday spirit, man. What can I say?
Yeah, sure. That's what we're going to use as an excuse for why your tree is up. Guys, let's talk games. What did we play today? And actually, I'm going to jump ahead and say that I bit the bullet, literally, and I bought Black Ops 3, and I've been playing it relentlessly, and I feel like a terrible human being every time I play it.
Are you having fun?
I am having
All right.
fun.
Well, that's what matters.
That's all that matters.
But I feel like one of those guys that plays Call of Duty. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you mean. And I would feel the same way. On the other hand, I'm a big believer in play what you like, and definitely don't play a game if you feel like it's become a job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Good on you, man.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
also,
good.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's faster paced. The sliding,
Sure.
and the jumping and the wall riding. I thought it was gonna be just this stupid tacky part of the game, but it actually ends up mattering. And the better you get at it, the better your gameplay becomes. They have this weird thing on how to like unlock chests or something that will give you random items, and I got this amazing like super bright 80s skin for one of my characters.
Yes.
So now that's like all I'm using. It's like
Yes.
neon pink and green, and it's got triangles and little squigglies all over it.
Oh,
It's the
that's
best.
gorgeous.
Right on.
It's the best thing in the world, so that's the only thing I use now. It's pretty great. Chris, what did you play this week?
This week, well, I played a lot of my Metabet game. So I played StarCraft, but I'm going to get into that later. So I guess I played a couple of the usuals. I guess I'll talk about something I haven't talked about. For mobile, I played this game. I brought it up when we were talking about MOBAs, or we were talking about something.
Yeah.
It's called Call of Champions. It's a 5-minute MOBA. Yeah. I mentioned it to Mitch, and Mitch was like, "Oh, like super pumped about it because he had the iOS, and he found out that they did, and in fact, have it come out on Android."
Oh, nice.
And so I got it. We played it for a little bit, and I was been playing it a lot this week. And I got a couple of my other friends, Mike and Aaron, into it.
Nice.
And we were playing, and it's a lot of fun. It's a 3v3 MOBA for your phone, and it can't last more than 5 minutes.
Is this the one where you push the ball instead of the creep
This is
waves?
the one where you push the ball.
There's 2 lanes. You stand next to a ball, and as you stand next to it, it moves the ball closer to the tower. And the tower, you can attack it if the ball's not there, but it does like triple damage if the ball's not next to it.
Oh, yeah.
It still hits you when the ball's there, but like you take a little less. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, and it's 5 minutes. Like that's exactly what I wanted for a mobile MOBA.
Absolutely.
Right?
For sure.
I played Vainglory, I mentioned another time, and that's like your traditional MOBA on a phone. You have to buy the items, you're worried about mana, you're worried about jungle, and you're laning for like 5 minutes, and then you get into the real game. Like, it's laborious for your phone.
Yeah, it's completely going against what it means to be a mobile game. They were, I think, too wrapped up in trying to emulate the MOBA experience, forgetting it's a mobile experience.
Yes, 100. And Call of Champions, I feel, really did the game justice. It teeters on that line of like the mobile kind of, I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for here is, but when a game is trying to make you pay out the ass for a lot of stuff.
Freemium.
Yeah, freemium. It's like a freemium. It's bordering on that line because it takes a long time to get enough gold for a hero.
Yeah.
But if you think about it at the same time, the amount of time you spend in a regular MOBA match compared to how much you'd get for this, it ends up equaling out. So it's all right. It's definitely worth for free, and it's great. for mobile. It's exactly what a mobile MOBA should be. I like it. So what about you, Dakota? What did you play this week?
Games that I played of note, the usual suspects, of course, but out of the ordinary, I played some Battlefield 4 with some buddies. I had like the hunger for some gun games, some old CS:GO gun game.
Oh yeah, you were saying.
And so instead of I played a little bit of CS:GO, and then I said, "Fuck this!" And so we decided to go install Battlefield 4 instead, and played there. And it was fun. I also played a quick little indie flick on Steam called Punch Club, I think it's called, and it's basically a boxing game, but it's a boxing simulator. It's a boxing management simulator. So
I was gonna ask, is it like one of those management
you
they have all over?
Exactly.
Like
you don't actually control the guy in the ring, but you do assign him his moves and tell him what to train and stuff like that. It's good. It's I love games like that. If you like what's the Warhammer game, the Warhammer football game?
Oh, Blood Bowl.
Yeah, if you like Blood Bowl or games like that simulate sports, but then they're more gamey, Punch Club, kind of cool.
Huh.
Kind of cool.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome, yeah.
Like
That's a very interesting new game. We haven't really heard that from pretty much any of us playing that type of game in a while. So it's
Yeah,
nice
that's
to get
right.
It's nice to get a new face, It's nice to get a new face. All right, let's actually move on to our main topic. We've got a lot to talk to today. And by talk to, I actually meant talk about. So today, our main topic is going to be on balancing. We're going to talk a lot about balancing today because there's a lot of issues. I mean, what is balancing? I mean, we can start right there. What the hell is balancing? And for a lot of people, balancing just means like playing a fair game. Everything is on equal terms, and everybody has an equal opportunity to win the game. But for a lot of people that actually look into balancing is more like every option is viable, and that's a better understanding of it. Because a lot of people think like everything's fair. Like, well, no, but one option should be better than the other, or it shouldn't be better than the other. There should be equal opportunities to win or accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish with balancing. So let's dive into that. For you guys, what do you guys think balancing is? Dakota,
go first, Dakota.
Let's look at you first.
Well, it's funny. I know when we put this question in our show notes just to kick off the main topic, and it was supposed to be like a gimme, just like an easy, quickly answer this to define the term so we can move on. But I'm sure you guys discovered in your research as well as mine that not even the experts and the industry people, the developers, agree on what it means to balance a game, which I found really interesting just in and of itself. The best definitions that I came across, one similar to what you just said, where gameplay is all about choices and balance is about making sure that none of your game elements become irrelevant by making sure that the choices are always viable. That was my favorite. I found some others. A dude who worked on Halo 2 for a long time. He even considered balance not to be a process, but a state of the game. So it's not like he was less concerned about the process of balancing a game, rather the product of the game itself and what state it ended in. And so he would consider that a game ends with a state of either balanced or not, which to me sounded kind of black or white.
Right.
I think
that's
more like it's more like degrees, less balanced, more balanced, degrees in between them.
Still doesn't speak to the question, what is balancing, really?
Yeah, right. What do you have to do to get it into the state?
Yeah, like what does that state mean?
Right. What did you come across, Chris?
To be honest, I was looking at everything around balancing. This one was just something I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to wait for it and wing it. Like, I'm not finding my answer here. And I feel like that's my answer. It's something that no developer can actually achieve, and it's like this mystical dragon.
It's getting real deep.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, if balance is a spectrum from like less balanced to more balanced,
it's a complete chaos.
Perfectly right. From complete horseshit to some I don't know what. Like the actual state of being perfectly balanced is like theoretical. It's not even practical, right? You can't achieve it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's.
Well, I don't think it's theoretical. I think it's definitely achievable. I think right now a lot of people are and by people I mean developers, are phoning it in. But let's get into that later. Let's actually start off with, let's talk about maybe like to dissect it a little bit. the common methods of balancing. Like, what are some of the ways that we see developers balancing a game? Dakota, hit me up with some ways that we see it.
Yeah, sure. I guess one of the most common methods is a mathematical approach. You got to start somewhere.
Right.
So usually, what a developer might do, if they're in an environment, it totally depends on the kind of game you're making. So let's assume, for sake of conversation, we're talking about a multiplayer game, maybe with a bunch of classes, or let's talk about a first-person shooter, no classes, but different guns. So you'd start with a baseline gun that's got basically average stats and all the twistable, turnable knobs that the gun might have, and that's your mathematical norm or the prototype that you compare everything else to. And then from there, you go, okay, if I turn this knob, I'm going to adjust maybe the rate of fire down and the damage up and the spread wide or thin. And in that way, you've got like a mathematical approach where you can say, I want to cover like this spectrum of power based on all of these separate axes. And you can actually like formula out some numbers that you then plug into your various guns, and now you've got choices. So that might be a mathematical approach. People also use different mathematical techniques too. Chris?
I agree. Like, I think that's the way Mitch likes to view the balancing idea, from like how you said that we could definitely balance things and people are just phoning it in. Like, I feel like you think a lot of things can just be mathed to balance.
Well, so it depends on whether or not the game like is essentially solvable. If you think of a game like chess, like that's a solvable game, so there's a way to balance said solvable game. Now, granted, there's always going to be an imbalance to chess because whoever goes first is going to have a slight advantage.
Exactly.
But for the most part, like that game is balanced. Like every feature of it is balanced, and therefore the game becomes like solvable. And to me, that's the way I look at most games. Now, obviously, a game with like hidden information, it's very hard to put a number on that. It's going to be hard to judge like, oh, is this gun going to be good on this map? Like with your previous example.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different factors that are going into it, but it's all a big mathematical equation. I think.
That's exactly it, though. The reason that games, current era games, are so difficult to balance is because the feature creep is huge. Like the games are very, very, very complex. They've got, as you said, in an FPS, you not only have to worry about the guns, you have to worry about all the maps and make sure that each gun is viable, hopefully, on all maps, or not particular guns are better on particular maps. And these kind of things. Chess was your counterexample, and chess, by comparison, is a much, much simpler game to balance. The game is symmetrical, so that helps. And so the only balance that needs to go into the design of chess is to make sure that each of the pieces have a viable role, and that you don't ever want to just not have a piece. It's like, yes, the queen is much more powerful of a piece than a pawn is, but you only have one of them, and you have 8 pawns.
Could you bring that back? Like, I'm speaking purely from conjecture here because I have no idea, but could you put chess to a mathematical place, since you can put each movement to a certain number of squares? Like, I don't know if you could balance it in that way.
Chess is inherently theoretically solvable. We can't do it with our human brains, but you can solve, like, there is
stupid
a
squishy human brain.
I'm just saying, like, there is a correct way to play chess, and like the person who goes first relatively has. But as far as like putting numbers on it, I mean, yes, I think so.
Yeah, I know that, like, chess masters, like if you go first, the other person's their goal is to draw that match, because the first person who goes, it has like at least at a chess master level, has like a 70 or 90% win rate.
And that's probably because the chess master level of play is approaching perfect play.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's approaching that theoretical solvability. They're obviously not, like I said, I was doing some research on chess specifically when it came to balancing, because that's chess and Go are like the ones that like everybody goes to when it comes to balancing, because they're such simple games.
What I found.
But apparently, like, if you do the math, it's theoretically solvable, but our brains are not able to do that shit. So when you get close to that, maybe you're playing like 80% perfect, like, then you're going to get to a point where if you go second, you have such a disadvantage from going first that you're just trying to draw at that point.
Yeah. So what other methods do we see other than maths to balance games?
I think at a certain point, you need to forgo math and just have instinct take over. because
that
like
makes sense.
there's certain things you can't, you just know it has to change, like to make sense, right?
Well, can you
Like if
can
you're
you
playing a
elaborate on
game,
that? Like, can you give me an example
if
of
you're
that?
playing a shooter, for example, like if you're playing a shooter and you have a gun, and you don't even have to know exactly the damage counter or the damage ratio. If you're playing if you're shooting like a assault rifle that's shooting a bunch of bullets, rounds per second, and it's hitting at what you would expect a sniper rifle, like every bullet is a one-hit kill, no matter where the body hits, you're gonna know, oh, that doesn't make sense. like,
Right, but then it comes down to math. Is how low do you bring
exactly.
it down
But they
until
need
it
to
becomes
work.
like useless?
They need to work together. And a couple other things in games such as we get into maybe like Mario Brothers. That game needs to be balanced. We get way into single player later, but just talking about the fact of how to view it from a mathematical or an instinctual point, you can't really, you could balance, I guess, how many frames he'll move or maybe he'll slide when he lands, but at the same point, you just have to know, how does it feel when he jumps? Like, is that a good way for him to jump? Is that like, will a player get a tactile feeling to know, oh, I'm jumping at this arc, this is comfortable, I can at least estimate where I'm going to land in that way, because the player isn't going to calculate those frames.
No, players not, but I think that the designers will. I think I remember reading some of Shovel Knight's design, and the level architect does use math. You're right. A lot of it's going to be feel. It's going to be prior experience, applying prior knowledge to what you know and how to, what makes a fun level. But that's more. That's kind of a more broad statement about design. But as far as making sure that the balance of a single player game, that is the difficulty, is not too hard and not too easy, comes down to math. It can be done with math, because you're going to do things like say, okay, this gap, maybe you're going to design a gap and say this is a medium difficulty jump to make, and maybe the jump is going to be like 1/2 of the character's jump distance potential. But if you want to make a jump harder, you're going to say, okay, it's going to be more like 5/6 or like 3/4 or something like that. And so
Right.
math plays a role in that regard. But you're right, instinct does have quite a bit to do with it. I've got a quote from Ken Bergen, the 100 Rogues developer. It's a sweet iPhone roguelike. Play it if you haven't. It's quite good. He says, there aren't always clean-cut mathematical ways to balance your game. At the end of the day, it tends to come down to an educated guess on the part of the designers. He's making a kind of a bold claim. That might be how he does it, but obviously we've heard and read that a lot of designers and developers do it differently.
Well, there's obviously like the most common way is you either use math or instinct, but at the end of the day, it also comes down to like play testing and data, and that's where a lot more math and instinct comes in. Like, you're going to have play testers start playing your game, and they're going to tell you, oh, this gun, for example, this assault rifle that's hitting like a sniper rifle, this thing's hitting way too hard. They may not know exactly what to do with it, but they're going, this thing's too good, let's bring something down or up a notch.
I think that's a great, like, that's where, because you need all of these three methods to really like get idea.
Right.
That's the idea. We were reading around on the internet, and at least for me, I seem like all three. You can't, you obviously can't just pick one who's going to sit there with a calculator and make their video game, but
right, and,
like,
and not see how it feels, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But the play testing is such a great part, because you get the instinct of, well, you hope a range of different player abilities, right? You hope you get the low end and the high end players in there, as well as the middle end, to get how they feel about it, as well as you could keep that data of like win-loss ratios. I don't know, how many times people die at certain areas, or the straight up number. Like, for instance, in a game like StarCraft, where there's units who do X amount of damage, have certain amount of health, and then you could upgrade that damage to have like +3 more damage per shot. Like, you could actually data mine those numbers and get a great. And that's where playtesting and the idea of betas, like, are such a great idea. Like these open betas, I feel like they used to be, back in the day, a beta, when you got like heard about a beta, nobody ever got into a beta. You're like, oh, that game's in beta. But then slowly they'd be like, hey, I heard if you like put in your email or like how to clip out this thing from the back of the box and send it in, you could get a chance to be in the beta.
Yeah, right. It was
Call
a big
this guy
deal.
Steve, and you like, go in the back alley with him for like 5 minutes. Like, you might get into the beta.
Yeah,
Who
you might
knows?
get into the beta. And it was like, what's a beta? beta. But like now that I guess developers have seen how much better a game could get from all that raw data just pouring out of people, just hot raw data.
Hot raw data pouring. Just yeah. No, I agree. Like and there's a bunch of different ways that like playtesters will do that. Some of them will use the beta method. I actually saw. I was reading an article on balancing, and somebody was talking about the auction method, and I thought this was a very interesting method. They basically said that like he's like boil it down to you're trying to create like a StarCraft-esque game, and you have orcs versus humans, and I don't know, maybe you're trying to figure out like the orcs are just like a little bit stronger than the humans, so you're trying to figure out like the starting gold. And then he was like, what you do is you let each person bid on how much gold they want to give up to play the orcs, like the stronger units, and then they'll basically lose that bid, and the other team will start as the weaker humans, but they'll start with the 400 gold. And eventually you'll find out about how much that is worth and how much they should start with, because it'll eventually reach like a median, and it'll always be the same after that point. And I thought that was a very interesting method.
That's very interesting.
Use that. Yeah, you could apply that to a lot of different things. Like
that's like
I don't know.
That's a combination of playtest and math, because you have to crowdsource the mathematics. Similarly, another math principle that a lot of game design uses is the Fermi solution. Have you guys heard of this? Read of this?
No, I haven't.
It was devised, created, whatever, written by Enrico Fermi. He was a physicist, and basically the question is estimate how many piano tuners there are in Chicago, and he used a method that was really accurate. And the way it works is you basically make successive estimates. So first he would say, okay, I'd estimate that there's roughly X people in Chicago, which means that there's roughly N households in Chicago, which means that there's roughly P houses with a piano in them. And then there's going to be even less households that have a piano in them, which people also own a tuner. And so by making these successive estimates, he'll arrive at a number that's pretty fucking close to the actual number. And so the idea is that you might overestimate the first one because you don't know, you're just guessing. But then you might underestimate the second estimate and then overestimate the third. And so it averages closer and closer to a true value if you layer these estimates on top of one another. And game design uses the same principle. So you get math.
One of the things actually mathematical that I ended up reading, I think it was by the game designer Sid Meier, made a lot of like the civilizations and stuff like that. One of his methods that a lot of people have taken into game design is called the rule of two, or some people call it halving and doubling, which is what he does is if there's something that doesn't seem right or imbalanced in his game, he will just double the amount that it does or halve it. So if a unit's supposed to do 100 damage, he'll make it do 200 or make it do 50.
I hate that method. That method is
but the thing is,
I fucking hate that method.
It's got a very good reason.
The thing is, I don't. It shouldn't be done in a setting where we would be playing it. I feel like this should be done.
I 100% agree. That should
this should definitely be done in
before it's released.
Because that's a thing that like I feel like what the design and what makes super sense is if you buff up something so much by like 100%, you'll be able to see what kind of real impact that has on the game. It'll be like, like if this is super strong, that these things shouldn't be, like this is actually way too strong. Maybe let's bump it up, or maybe bump it up just a little bit. It shouldn't ever be that strong. Or maybe like let's leave it where it is and maybe mess with something else.
Right.
Might have a completely different impact than what I thought it might be having on the game.
The idea is that you take something, maybe something is too powerful or underpowered, and you need to buff it, as you said. You already know like the floor of the power of that thing, but you don't know the ceiling yet. And so if you just buff it a tiny bit and it's still underpowered, you still don't know the ceiling. So you haven't really learned a lot. So by doubling, you might actually cross the threshold of the ceiling, and now you have a very narrow lens of the acceptable values for that particular game element. So it's very useful for quickly narrowing the possible range of values for a given game element. And that's very useful, as you guys alluded to, in pre-production, when you need to quickly generate numbers. But what we don't want to see that is, for example, in like a MOBA that's in active development, but actively being played. You don't want to see that kind of change in like a patch note, right? Where something is all of a sudden twice as strong as it was.
You just don't want to see it live, and I think that's the main point. Like, you do not want to see something like that happen live, and I think that leads us to our next point. So, like, in the past, you have developers having a very finite amount of time to balance a game, and now that we have like a digital like wonderland of games, we're seeing game balance completely change now. Now we're seeing balancing happen on the fly in the middle of patches, specifically for like League of Legends. And Chris, I feel like they use that half doubling method, and which is where I get really, really frustrated. You'll have a character come out and he'll just be like, his numbers are like 100, and everyone's like, oh, this shit's broken. So then they'll be like, okay, well now he's unplayable. And then people are like, oh no, like this character's fucking unplayable. So then they'll buff him back up to way too much. And I get it. It's supposed to oscillate and eventually meet in the middle. I get the point of the idea, but when I have to play through that, it's really fucking frustrating. Like, they should do that on their end. I should not have to deal with that shit.
You touched on something else that League does fairly often, is release a hero that seems too powerful. And that's a very purposeful design decision. The reason they do that is because something that's new, if it's not fun when it's way powerful, it's definitely not going to be fun when it's balanced, right? So they usually release, and other games will first try things a touch above tune in order to see if the idea is fun at all. But all of this, go ahead, Chris.
Some people might think of that as a more nefarious
a business decision.
Yeah, right, a more nefarious method where like, oh, this guy's super overpowered. Let me buy this guy so I can just stomp on everybody for a couple weeks till I fix him.
I keep losing to this new hero. What the fuck? I gotta buy him. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, well, this all relates to something that's very interesting about game balance. In the past, developers had a finite time to balance a game, but now we live in the digital era, and games, we kind of play them live as they're being created, as they're being balanced continuously, even after release. So that's one way that game balance has changed in a big way. We the players are directly subject to it when that wasn't the case before.
Yeah. What do we think? Do we think this is this better? Is this worse? How do we feel about it, Chris?
What better or worse? The era of patches where we could
like what we're in now. Like, think about it. Okay, think about it before. When you ship out I don't know, Super Mario 64, that shit, that's it. That's all you got. Whatever you put it as, that's it. You can't go back and be like, can you like all ship your games back real quick? I gotta tweak some knobs. I gotta put some more shit in there. Like, that's it. Your game is the way it's gonna be. Like, now it feels like, and I don't want to say this for everybody, but it feels like a lot of people are like, oh, this shit looks good. It plays fine. Sounds good. Ship it out. We'll fucking fix everything else when it's done. I don't like that. I'm not a huge fan.
No, I mean, I've touched on this before, how I felt like those old games were just pieces of art, right? Like SNES games and like N64, but that also kind of speaks to Nintendo's QA team, like their quality assurance team. They do a bang up job of trying to hit everything in there. I don't know what kind of magic they do. There's actually some kind of room called like the Tree House or something. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
I might be making up that name, but there's some kind of like super ultra secret. Yeah, it's some kind of super ultra secret, like, I don't know, what's the Illuminati next level Nintendo board.
Oh my god.
That like checks
this
every
all
game.
Sounds completely made up.
I know. But there's some kind of Nintendo treehouse, I swear. Somebody's got to know about it. I'll look it up afterward. I'll tell you next time. But they have like a lot of work that goes into their Q&A. While I do like that old style of having to try and get it to that like magical point, the fact that we can fix things, especially because so many games are multiplayer now, we need that on the fly patching, because not only can we keep things fresh by adding new things, but you're going to have to, the more things you add in, the more it's going to interact probably terribly with the old content and need to be fixed.
I think we've got like a definite like pros and cons for being in the age of like live updates and kind of being a part of the testing process. Obviously, it's bad when you come in, you run into something that's severely imbalanced, but on the other hand, players can have a very real, more direct impact on the direction a game goes, which is something that's only possible because of the kind of digital, constantly online era that we live in. There was a game, actually, it's coming out next week, Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is like kind of an indie roguelike dungeon crawler, very fucking hard. A big part of the game is your characters die and you just like hire new dudes. And somewhere along the line of development, they're still in development, they implemented 2 systems and the community just did not like them at all. The 2 systems made the game even harder than it already was, and there was huge backlash. And it took a lot of discussion and back and forth and minor tweaks between the players and the developers to get to a place where both the developers are happy that their vision is still intact and the players are happy with the difficulty of the game. And that's only possible because we've got early access and constant beta tests and all that. So it's a very real part of balancing now.
I mean, I get it. I get that there's two sides to this sword. I just, like I said, there are a lot of games that I play that I feel like, I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? I'm looking at a pile of unbalanced hot garbage, and I really am not. I'm just like not a fan of it. Like I'm not. I don't know. So let's talk about this. So when we talk about imbalance, you have a lot of people whine and bitch and moan. Oh God, that gun is so imbalanced. Oh God, this character is so imbalanced. Do we think that balance is kind of like a player perception? Does this play a role? Like people bitching about a character, does that kind of define if the character's imbalanced? Or is that the person like looking for just a reason to why they lost? Like, Chris, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know you probably got a lot of them. Old man Rivers over here probably got a lot of thoughts on this.
The mob mentality definitely plays a role, but I feel like that's a lot of people on forums and social media, right? That's what social media is for.
Yeah.
Everybody just yelling about stuff. Player perception probably does play a role in game balance to the players, maybe, and that might lead to some revelations, maybe, about a real problem. But I mean, player perception about game balance might result from something being inherently wrong, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You have like the pitchfork mentality where like sometimes that's a fucking, that's a Frankenstein, but sometimes it's like just or like it's like a witch hunt. Sometimes it's a witch, but sometimes you just drown like a 23-year-old female and like really nothing was wrong with her. And I think that's the problem is that you get these when you have
it's middle-aged.
When you have this era where people can, or developers and companies can update things immediately, I think that they're almost inclined to go with the mob, though, because the mob is what's playing their game. If 75% of the people playing think that this character Rengar is batshit busted, I mean, it doesn't matter if he's batshit busted or not. You might have to just turn it down so people don't stop playing your game. How do you feel about that? Is that correct? Is that the right thing to do, Dakota?
Well, I think there's two. You made me think of two different things. One, I remember at BlizzCon, Dustin Brower, one of the designers on Heroes of the Storm, mentioned specifically. Somebody asked him in a question line if they react to player perception when it comes to balancing, and he said no. He basically said no. They use the data they collect through the game data collection mechanisms they have in place under the hood, but they don't do a lot of reacting to forum stuff because they got the numbers, right? And the numbers don't lie. On the other hand, you're not wrong when you say that, sometimes players find a way to enjoy a game that the developer didn't initially foresee, right? And in that case, it might be more appropriate for the developers to react and kind of like say, okay, here is what you want to the players. They maybe show the developers a way to enjoy the game that they hadn't anticipated and say, okay, well, that's not maybe exactly our initial vision, but we will go with that. Or maybe we'll compromise.
I don't know. I get really frustrated when I see stuff like that happen. I mean, I probably fall victim of it as well, thinking that a character is really broken when really I was just bad at the game and I missed my blitzcrank hooks. But I don't know. Here's
the thing,
Chris, talk to me.
And especially in a game like League of Legends, the balance becomes even more difficult because you have to balance for different groups. League of Legends has to balance not only for the casual player who they have a lot of, by casual player I mean not competitive level, right? Like the competitive gamers, the ones who are going to be making a shitload of money because they're making the streams, they're making people watch the game, they have to balance it to that high level, right? And if you balance it to that high level, you're going to leave maybe some cheese tactics, some cheese type moves that lower level people could pull off on other people because they aren't at that level. So it becomes, in that game in particular, they have two different areas to balance too.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so and you touched on a very important point. So when you have a lot of different elements and you have a large player base, it comes down to you have to decide what your game is trying to do or what the audience to your game is and balance it around that and let the rest kind of catch up. So for example, like if you're playing a game, if you're trying to balance a game like Street Fighter, well, guess what? That's a fighting game. That's a very competitive fighting game. Balance that around the competitive level. Yes, this certain thing that, I don't know, Ryu does might be batshit busted to the casual player, but guess what? Doesn't matter. Like, at the higher level where they care, everything's balanced and everything's, I was reading something on Settlers of Catan, and they were talking about how in Settlers of Catan, at a casual level, it's hard to recognize when somebody has a better placement than somebody else, right? But at a higher level, that will correct itself because people who know how to play that game will see that that person has a slight advantage and just not trade with them until the advantage has kind of evened out. And that's kind of what you need to start doing as a balancer. Stop trying to please everybody, please your audience, and that's it. Like, if you're trying to make a game like League of Legends, are you trying to make it competitive or are you trying to make it casual? Whatever you're trying to do, balance it around that audience. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing in certain games is we have developers balancing, try to please everybody, And
But that
I'm seeing
that game has
Go ahead.
it has two big audiences. Like, you can't just pick one.
But you have to, and that's the thing, because you're never, with the amount of elements in League of Legends, you're never going to perfectly balance that game. And if you keep trying to cater to two different sides of the spectrum, you're never going to even get close to balancing that game.
I don't think he's wrong. I think that, and I saw this in some of the notes I came across by other developers. Sometimes you have to identify, because game balance is already so challenging. Trying to balance towards both a competitive level and a more casual level is even more difficult. It just adds a whole nother layer of complexity to the problem, to the math problem, the unsolvable math problem. And so sometimes you just have to acknowledge what your game is and balance towards that, right? That's what makes, for instance, Dota Dota. Dota is perfectly happy being the game it is and kind of targeting the demographic it does because that's what it wants to be.
Right.
This, moving beyond competitive and casual gamers, the MMO space is something similar, and I didn't find any really information on it, but you always hear, I'm going to use WoW as an example, but it really works with any MMO that has PvP, player versus player, versus PvE, player versus environment. Some people like to do the raids, the dungeons, etc. Some people like to go to the zones where they kill other people. There's a big discrepancy between those, like the numbers that people put out in each area. And I feel like that's kind of the same issue of competitive versus casual. They don't know where to put it. They don't know if they want to focus more on PvE or if they want to focus more on PvP. And especially in a game like WoW, where they have so many people doing both or one or the other, and everybody wants to have that. It's very difficult, but they have it in there. You have to try to. You can't just go, we're going to be PvE only and cut out the PvP crowd.
That's a different body completely. I think that's like a completely different game. But let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to our next point. It's a question I was going to ask anyway, and I think it's a good occasion to move on to this next point. In the past, a complete revamp of a particular game element, a card, a gun, a hero, is that an acceptable balance practice? Recently, we had, let's give an example. Recently in Hearthstone, we had the Warsong Commander changed completely. The card was completely changed and rendered functionally useless. It used to be quite powerful and drive a very particular deck, and now it doesn't do anything. So what do you guys think about this practice generally speaking, and then maybe we can talk about this card specifically?
I don't like it. I think if you had an idea for a card, just tweak that idea. Use these half doubling. I'd rather you have and double things than just completely change something, unless the idea is literally just so bad that you need to just change it because it's just not playable. But if a card is, for example, Warsong Commander, I don't think the card was too good that you needed to just shut it down. I just think you needed to tweak it a little bit. Maybe instead of 3 attack, 4 attack. Or a lot of people had said, if you, specifically with Warsong Commander, if you don't know what that card did, if you've never played Hearthstone before, basically it gave any creature with 3 attack or less charge. And charge means that it can attack immediately. What people were saying that they should have done is just made that a constantly static ability. So if it ever doesn't have 3 attack, it no longer has charge.
Yeah,
that would have honestly solved that problem.
Yeah, because people were comboing with giant monsters that would come out with 3, but end up going like 20 and one hit kill you in a turn. You couldn't return fire or do anything or defend yourself.
Yes, they would play a creature that would come out with 2 attack. They would do a bunch of shit. It would end up having 20 attack, and then it would hit you because it had charge. If you just stop that, if it goes over 3, it doesn't have charge anymore. If you just do that, it solves the whole problem. The card is still good, but it's not a completely different card. You didn't have to shut the whole deck down. I personally don't like it. Chris, thoughts on it?
I think you should. Sometimes an idea after a certain point just becomes, inviable in a certain kind of game. I think what you're saying, I would like that to happen to Warsong Commander, but maybe they did other testing that we don't know about that might have changed it. It just might have not been a good idea. It might have led to something that hindered their ideas for future mechanics, right? We don't have the full story for that. In this particular case, we don't have the full story. So I think that in certain cases, if you just the squeaky wheel should be replaced. Like if it's going to cause problems in the future, maybe nix it and put in something else that might be equal or might make up for the fact that you took out something that wasn't working. Blizzard's done it. They've revamped the whole kind of talent system totally, right?
Right. In WoW, you talking?
Yeah, in WoW.
See, that's the thing, though, is that's not a particular element. They did everybody's.
Everybody,
they did
right.
all of them, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's just the same idea, but a grand scale.
If you want to revamp all the warrior style mechanics, sure, but just to take away a fundamental card of the warrior and literally make it unplayable, I thought that was kind of a cop out.
Well, sometimes they thought it needed to be done, and I think also we're conflating 2 issues too. Not only did it have a big impact on the current meta, which is kind of how it got on their radar, but the card also presented the team a lot of design problems. So they were kind of pigeonholed into not ever making minions with 3 or less attack that do other stuff. They had to always keep Warsong Commander in mind and say, how might this card react with that one card? And that kind of speaks to a different problem that Hearthstone has. Hearthstone, there are becoming so many damn cards in the game that they are at the ledge, right? They need to implement some sort of card rotation system or something like Magic has, because it's impossible to balance all cards forever infinitely.
Yeah.
Right. This is gonna keep happening. Eventually, these things are gonna continue coming up. So I don't know.
Right.
Personally, I don't really like it unless a situation when I can see a revamp being relevant is if something has become outdated, right? So they just did a revamp in League of Legends for the character Poppy. And that made sense because Poppy's mechanics and her playstyle was a little bit outdated for the current playstyle of League of Legends. So it made more sense to make her kind of fit in with the rest of the, cast. That's something that I could see. And even then, they didn't even really completely revamp it. They just kind of changed her up a little bit. They didn't do an entire rehaul. They kept a lot of her mechanics, which I thought was really interesting. So let's talk about this. If they're gonna make a balance, whether it's a revamp and a complete overhaul, or if it's just going to be a slight having doubling, or whatever they're going to do, what's the timeline for this? What's an appropriate rate of change here, especially in an online game? Because we have Hearthstone, they try to avoid change. They
really do. They avoid it at all costs. They won't change a card unless they really, really need to. And I really respect that personally. I think you do too, right? Coming from a Magic background.
Oh, well, Magic does the same thing. Magic will sit there and wait. They'll be like, I don't know if this card should be banned yet or not. Let's give it 3 more months. Let's wait till the next set. So
and I know that
I respect it as well.
Yeah, and I know that some people are really calling for Hearthstone to be balanced way more often. Hey, it's digital. 2 weeks, every month, every season. Do a balance patch every season. Seasons probably would make more sense than 2 weeks, but honestly, I don't like either one of them. What about you, Chris? Do you think there's any merit to balancing every season?
Only if they're really changing things up. I don't find like I mean I guess the constant tweaking if balancing is always that moving goalpost, but I think it's needed if especially in a multiplayer space like that where you're constantly adding new things. It needs to be done and keep it fresh also because people will easily start leaving if they feel it's stale in any way, right? Like weird gamers are a fickle bunch, right? If nothing,
We are very
everything's
fickle.
saying the
We
same.
are very fickle, yeah.
Everything's saying the same. If like there's no news, they're like, what the hell are they doing? It's been 2 weeks since somebody tweeted a thing about this guy's left click button. Like,
Yeah. Left click buttons are important too. So
it's very very important.
I think that the reason I respect I love some left click, right click. I think the reason I respect Team 5's decision not to balance too often is because it kind of it makes when they're creating cards in the first place a more disciplined process, I think, and not like in an active way, not in an active way, not like, oh, if we patched later, we can be lazy and dumb with the cards. That's not what I mean. What I mean, though, is maybe even subconsciously, it kind of keeps them in check. It means like we really have to make these cards the best cards we can make on our release pass. And there's nothing, then no more. And that's like something that Magic has to do because they're paper. They don't have the luxury.
Right.
And I like that Hearthstone is adopting the same philosophy because they're treating the cards like they're set in stone. And that makes them try to be as tight as they can.
they're acting like a console game used to act, where like we put this out, this is it. Like we really don't want to touch this. Whereas, like I guess that's what I meant when I said before. Like a lot of other companies are phoning it in. I'm sure they're doing their best to balance things, and I'm sure they're really trying. But I can guarantee you, they're not trying as hard as games like Hearthstone or games like Magic. That console games where when you put them out, that's it, you're done, and there's really not a lot you can do, to save something that was completely and wholly wrong. So for me, as far as like a rate of change is concerned, I'd rather it happen immediately. If you're going to balance something, balance it, get it done with, because I want to start playing with it normally. So let's talk about we're on Twitch, obviously. We got a lot of people watching us. Let's talk about how Twitch social media has affected the rate of like meta games, right? And I can talk about it specifically with Magic because that's what I know about, at least.
Oh,
And
God.
when you're playing a game on a social media network, a game that a lot of people play, Magic, League, CS:GO, stuff like that, the meta game has been changing almost like weekly. It's insane. Like it's a rapid fire change. Whereas back when I started playing Magic before the internet was like a huge hub of knowledge and everybody was sharing every deck they ever made, you could go in with a brew and like nobody really knew what was good yet. It would take months to figure out how the game was good. Now it's like, nope, this character's good, or nope, this character's bad, and here's why. It's just crazy.
Back in the old days of Super Smash Brothers Melee, like, and that game
Oh
came
my
out
God,
such a long time. I got it when it came out with my GameCube. I saved up all my monies and bought a GameCube and Super Smash Brothers, and freaking nobody knew what to do with that. Like everybody was just like, oh yeah, throwing each other around. Oh, I love Kirby because you do the cool throw. But then somehow somebody found out about wave dashing on some forum,
Right.
And like slowly people start figuring out like what is this? How is he like floating around the map? Like what the hell is happening?
Yes.
Yep.
And I mean that changed the entire way. Like
Oh yeah,
the competitive.
they completely revolutionized Smash Brothers.
Right.
Yeah, like Smash Brothers was never the same after somebody was like, "Hey, look what I could do," and then it just spread like wildfire.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a good example of a game that was probably not designed to be a competitive fighter, right? And then when the community of competitive, we are going to perfect this gameplay, people got their hands on it. It's only a matter of time before they learn to abuse and exploit the game mechanics in order to completely optimize play, right? And then you get wave dashing. And now people are traversing the map in a way that the developers never saw coming, never considered when they were balancing the game. And so a slower, weightier character, like Fox, for instance, is going to benefit very greatly from wave dashing. And so all of a sudden, your balance is all thrown out of whack because movement and map traversal is a knob that they were able to tune with each character, and now it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And so that's an example of how like a game that's not designed necessarily for competitive play can be played very, very differently given the right people.
What's even more interesting is that you can't patch it, right? Like, that game evolved without having patches to change the way the basic mechanics worked. That was an exploit that somebody found out and utilized it. So that speaks volumes to how you don't even have to touch a game maybe for a while. Nobody knew about wave dashing for years.
Yeah.
Right? And then somebody
Years and
figured
years.
out, and then
Yep.
there's so many techniques
Yep.
have still been developed. Right, like
And
wobbling, like a
so-
chain grab by ice climbers, desyncing, like making them work separately. Like nobody knew about that. That you play this game for years and years. If it's a good game, you could change it. Like, I don't know.
That's a yeah, and that's a very good example, because when did Melee come out? I'm trying to think if the reason why like the innovation exploded with Melee was because it was kind of around before the social media heyday, and then right in the middle of it. And then once social media exploded and everybody's on Facebook and Twitter and Twitch and all that nonsense, now the rate of information sharing is just fucking huge, and now all of a sudden the gameplay has changed radically. I think we all agree. Our original question was, how has social media affected balance? In a big way, right?
Oh,
In
yeah.
a huge way. It has completely expedited the process. A meta game, for example, that would have taken you months to figure out what the best thing is. A meta game that you could have just like solved essentially. Here are the best cards. Here are the best guns. Here are the best champions. That would have taken you months to figure out. Now you can figure out in like a week. You know, because it's essentially like with that current meta game, you get that raw data a lot quicker. So you see what's happening, what's winning, what's losing. So it's pretty good. Now let's talk about, we did discuss this, we touched on it a little bit, and I want to get to the meta bet, so I don't want to take a lot of time on this. But let's talk about balancing in single player games. Chris, you had some things you wanted to say about it. Take us away with this, man.
I mean, everybody takes, we talk about multiplayer games because I feel like that's where everybody's talking, right? Everybody's always discussing, arguing about what the balanced character is, and it's really competitive, right? You're going to want to be the best with your favorite character. You don't want your favorite character to be underpowered. But in a single player game, I mean, that's all you have, right? It's just you and the machine. So,
That's all you got.
like, I feel like balancing in single player is really taken for granted, because if a game isn't balanced in single player, you just find whatever works the best. In an RPG, for example, if you have like a bunch of different classes and specs, if you find out that the rogue, if you backstab every time, you one-hit kill if you get this certain item, that's what you're going to do. And you're just going to beat the entire game,
Right.
and it's not even going to be a challenge anymore.
Right,
You
and
you
that's-
really need to... Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's where balancing kind of takes that other side that a lot of people don't think about, where it's not just about what, like, everything being as good as everything else, but everything being as viable as everything else. So when you go into a single player game and you're like, wow, am I gonna take the crossbow? Am I gonna take the shotgun? Or am I gonna melee? And it's like, oh, well, actually, meleeing is way fucking better than everything else. It takes the decision out of the game. It's like, why would I play with the crossbow if meleeing is just so much fucking better? And that's the problem. And that's why people take it for granted. It's like, no, all of these options that you had, all of them are viable. All of them are going to be good enough to get you to the end, and not one is going to really outshine the other. And I think people do take that for granted. It's a huge, huge part of single-player gaming that people don't really think about. Dakota,
Yeah.
you have any thoughts on this?
Not any new thoughts. I mean, you're right. I think people do take it for granted. It's a lot of hard work to make all of these choices, and these huge state machines is what they are. Programming talk. Viable is fucking hard, and man, there are a lot of good games out there. The more we talk about games, the more we do some research in games, so we can have these episodes on very specific topics. Just make me appreciate and love video games more and more. And game balancing seems fucking hard. I do not envy those guys.
Oh, yeah, it seems very difficult. I think that's kind of like overall, that's kind of what we figured out. There is no easy way to do this. There's no simple way to do this. You just do it. You spend time on it, and you slowly
Just do it.
Yeah, you just do it. So
your
let's,
dreams
guys,
become true.
a lot of new people in the chat. Let's introduce them to the meta bet. All right, Dakota, there's a lot of new people here. Why don't you explain exactly what the meta bet is?
All right, for those of you who don't know, the meta bet is the game where Mitch, Chris, and I bet on a Metacritic score of a video game coming out. Last week, we bet on a game Actually, 2 weeks before that, we bet on another game. Chris lost that bet. So over the past week, he had to endure a video game punishment that I got to assign to him because I won. Chris, I had you play StarCraft, nothing but walling yourself in and using air units. How did that go?
Yes.
Well, well, I hadn't played StarCraft 2, the multiplayer, at least for the newest one yet. So I was looking forward to getting into it and being like, having a good week. But my first week went a little bit. It actually went really well. Okay. I bet you guys were like, oh, this was going to be awful. He's going to have a shit time. But I did really well. It came from a lot of my experience in old StarCraft playing No Rush 20 maps. Right? Where you just you got a map with infinite resources, and you'd play with a team of 5 people, and you'd be on one side of the map, and you just have to turtle yourself in for 20 minutes and build as fast as you can, as much stuff, and max out, so that when 20 minutes hit or 15 minutes hit, you guys just rushed each other with everything you had and tried to take out the bases.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of I miss
of that.
Doing that. God.
Yeah.
Damn.
Years of that has made me kind of it prepared me for this moment, right? To box myself in.
So
I didn't have as much time.
Do you have any specific moments that stick out in your head?
The specific time at the very beginning when I was starting, because I played one match just so I could be like, okay, what are the new units and structures? Because it's different from the single player. So I played one match to get my feet wet. Mm-hmm. Second match, I go in, a Protoss player, it comes into my base as I'm building. I'm blocking off myself at the ramp, right, so that nobody could get into my base. He comes into my base, and Protoss players, when they build a building, it just starts warping in automatically. The little builder unit doesn't have to stay there working on it. Yeah. So he starts building a couple different buildings, and I can't make any ground units to fight off this guy. So he keeps creating buildings,
but there's no reason.
Yeah, no, I can't because the meta bet.
Oh, that's right. No,
I can't fight him.
I forgot.
So he's got this little probe running around building stuff, and he just slowly starts building towers and towers me in my base, and I can't do anything about it. God damn it, this sucks.
Fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to happen from that meta bet. So I'm so glad that it did happen.
That's great.
So this
week. Last week we bet on the game That Dragon Cancer. Came out today. We all bet. For a recap, I bet 79. Mitch had the single cancer ribbon score of 80. Chris had the double cancer ribbons, 88.
So
going high
in
there
the
with
money
the 88.
Position. I literally cannot lose this bet.
No way for Mitch to lose. We go closest to. We don't do Price is Right rules, so you can go over it. So today, based on 10 critics, That Dragon Cancer has a Metacritic score of 76. Making me the winner.
Chris, you tried to phone it in with cancer ribbons, and they didn't give a shit.
You tried to pander to the cancer, Chris. You can't pander to the cancer, bro.
It's That Dragon.
So, Chris, what are you playing that I can punish you in? I kind of want to punish you in Hearthstone only because we've got a chat room full of Hearthstone players. So we'll talk amongst ourselves about punishments. Chat, if you can think of a fun, crippling way for Chris to play some Hearthstone this week, let us know in chat. Meanwhile, what are you playing, Chris, if we end up doing a different game?
Well, I wanted to play some StarCraft normally.
That'd nice. Not StarCraft.
I would love to cripple his StarCraft playing one more week. Just let him never play the game.
He's literally never played online.
Damn it. Right? Every week I just lose. You guys keep hitting it. I'll play some Heroes of the Storm. I'll play some Duck Game. Play some Rocket League.
Duck Game, yes.
Duck Game. What can we do with Duck Game, Mitch?
Well, we did Duck Game last week, and that was a lot of fun. We did Pacifist Duck Game. You know what? We have not yet hit Heroes of the Storm. We have yet to hit.
You haven't hit Heroes for him? Yeah, we made him play Pudge all week.
Oh, we did. Okay, yeah, that's right. We did do. I did make you play nothing but Pudge.
We could do it again. We could go. I don't know.
Diablo Season 5 starts Friday.
Ooh, Diablo Season 5. And we're going to be playing, guys, keep a lookout. We post a lot of different videos of our interesting meta bets. We're going to be posting a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly video where we're all going to play Diablo with this new season and just do dumb shit. And I think we should hit Diablo, Dakota. What are you thinking?
Well, if we hit Diablo, he's playing with us because we're all going to play together.
That's fine. I'll carry him on my back.
All right, we have a Diablo punishment in store for him. How about it can be no set items. We can make him do an all left or an all right again. We can make him go no.
Can we make him play with his eyes closed and I tell
You
him
can
where
make
to
me
go?
play with.
I'll just tell him what to do. Chris, go up, go left.
Oh, that would be crippling.
You
That
can
would
make
be
me
really
play
hard to do.
all from like one specific class, like defense spells or like utility spells.
Or how about what's the first tier of spells you get? Just the one like magic missile. What is that class?
Those are like signature spells.
okay. No
Those cost-
signature spells. No signature spells. Now I know that they act as builders for a lot of classes.
Yeah.
The builder spender resource. So if you can figure out a way to make no signature spells work, I think that would be fucking rad.
Or even better, no non-signature spells. You can only use
All
mouse
signatures,
moves.
just all left click, right
Only
click.
mouse moves, baby girl. That's what we're doing. Yeah,
Okay, that's better,
Because then
'cause
you can actually play the game. You just have to run around and
I'll have like
just.
for the first like 20 levels, I'll have 2 moves.
Yes, he gets to play with us, so we can carry him through the levels for the most part. But I
damn
like
it.
so you can pick any class you want. So you can either swing an axe or you can throw a magic missile. That's basically what you've got, right?
That's all you got.
All right. Well, this week we are betting on a new game. The game we are betting on is Darkest Dungeon. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Darkest Dungeon comes out next week on Windows, Mac, Linux, Vita, and PS4. As I mentioned before, it is a roguelike-ish kind of game. You go into dungeons, you die a lot. It's kind of got a Cthulhu, Lovecraftian vibe to it.
I love
it's,
those types of games.
Dude, the art style is rad. This is a very, very, very good game. You'll see if you go look it up in Steam. I'm pretty sure it's got overwhelmingly positive reviews. It's coming out of Steam's early access next week. So I've got my number written down. You guys will
Let's type
too.
them in the chat. We're going to type in our MetaBet numbers. I'm betting under Analog Stick Radio. Chris is going to be under
Go ahead and
Tiff
just
Elf,
type-
I believe.
Yeah, type your name with a dash and then your number.
Yeah, I'll do
Make
that.
it
Yeah, I
easy.
guess we'll do that. Okay.
Make it easy.
My MetaBet for this game is going to be this. Okay, got it.
All right, Chris, do you have yours ready to go?
I mean, yeah, I'm tired of losing, so I'm gonna. Yeah, I think.
Make sure you type in Chris Dash and then what your bet is so that we know.
Okay,
All right.
Chris. Yes.
3, 2, 1, enter. Boom. There
Yes,
are
money
numbers.
position.
All right, Mitch is in the
Damn
money.
it!
So we'll go bottom up again. Chris has a score of 82. Mitch is
Damn
at
it!
84, and I'm up top with 87. These are the Metacritic score predictions we've got for Darkest Dungeon. So next week we will find out what's what.
I like how we're slowly getting better at judging things. As you can see, we were all getting relatively close. We're getting really good at judging things, guys. I'm proud
Yeah, I think
of
so.
us. I'm proud
think
of
so.
us. All right, as always, Analog Stick Radio, this podcast, is brought to you by BitCultures. Now, BitCultures is a site that features video game reviews, opinion pieces, digital media, including this very show. So if that sounds something that you're interested, check them out at bitcultures.com. If you want to reach us at Analog Stick Rad Guys, you can email us at analogstickradio@gmail.com or tweet at us at ASR Podcast. Very hard to remember, but you're gonna have to figure it out. Now, Analog Stick Radio records every Tuesday night here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Analog Stick Radio at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Published to iTunes and all your favorite podcast trackers on the following Thursday. So, make sure you subscribe to whatever medium that you use so you can check us out because we're pretty cool. We're some rad guys, you know what I'm saying? Guys, any parting words before we wrap it up and hang out with the Twitch chat for a little bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Disco Pete left us a comment on the Big Culture's website. He said he loved the cast. He just wanted to let us know that he will play Evolve with us if it's still for $13.
Oh, yes.
We'll be like one of like 10 people on the servers. I'm so down.
Yep.
Wait, did he post us a picture of him on New Year's listening to our podcast? Because I feel like that was
With his
that was
mom or 9 people.
He
Yeah,
did not.
9 people or his
not-
mom. That was the challenge. If you posted on New Year's Eve a picture of you listening to our podcast with your mom or 9 people, I would buy you Evolve for sure. So
He did
get that
not, but
picture, Dakota?
we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he was with his mom on New Year's.
well, I hope he was with his mom on New Year's. Like, come on now. All right, well, let's just wrap it up, and we're gonna hang out with the Twitch chat, talk about it a little bit. Once again, I am Mitch. For myself, Chris, and Dakota, this has been Analog Stick Radio, episode 18. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see ya.
See ya.
Bye.